In South Block, which is where most of the defense policy is formulated, there are three very different animals rule the roost. Monkey number 1 does not take advice. Monkey number 2 has no vision. Monkey number 3 does not articulate a strategic vision for the armed forces. This is what we want, ideally. And this is what we get. The reason is this. It would have been nice to think of defense as a straight water pipe. That water is poured in, more money goes into the pipe, it comes out, security is provided, hey presto. But that is how the money is spent. That is one reason why it takes us so many years to buy anything. It takes us a minimum, and these are figures put out by the government. It takes the government a minimum of 8 years to buy anything, from a combat aircraft to a boot or a helmet or a bulletproof jacket, anything you name it, canvas shoes, it'll take them, sports running shoes, it will take them a minimum of 8 years. We've set up this huge, gigantic, bureaucratic maze, which is just incapable of deciding, which is actually so process driven rather than result oriented. And this is the impact it's being having. India and China. I want to take you back to the second lost decade. The first one was in the 90s, when we didn't spend anything, we neglected defense. The second lost decade has begun somewhere in 2006, when India was the world's third largest arms importer in 2006. China was the world's largest arms importer. Saudi Arabia was number 2. And in the span of just 6 years, how that thing has been diametrically changed. India is today the world's largest arms importer. It's a very dubious distinction. China, on the other hand, is the world's 6th largest exporter. It aims to be one of the top 2 or 3 arms exporters in the next couple of years. I mean, here's the paradox. You have a country like India, which aspires to be on the United Nations Security Council, is a net importer of security. Over 70% of our armaments, ladies and gentlemen, are imported from countries of the Security Council, from the United States, from France, from Russia, from Great Britain. We don't import from the Chinese, but I'm sure if we ask them, they'd happily sell us. But this is costing us this, of course, is the famous picture of the 6 blind men of Hindustan. Every year, the Ministry of Defense wastes over 5,000 crore. Wasteful expenditure. These are departments that have not been shut down. These are little empires that have been built during the Second World War, which no longer matter. They just continue. I want to give you a figure as to the United States, which operates on a 24/7 basis around the world, has something called the Defense Logistics Agency. It supplies US troops with food and rations all over the world, wherever they operate. They have, the figures are here, it says they award 8,200 contracts daily. It employs just 2,500 employees in 26 offices all over the world. Our Army Service Corps, which operates just within the boundaries of India, deploys 10 times the number. We deploy hundreds of thousands of people just to supply people within the country. Why? Why is this happening? And why is it that we have institutions dating back to the Second World War? We recently had a talk. I was privileged to host a talk by General Malik and General Jacob. These are 2 generals from very different times of our history. And they said the same thing. Unfortunately, the Indian Army, the Indian Armed Forces, if you look at it, is still a Second World War institution. We haven't had any reform, no change. The United States is a case in point. Right up to 1986, they had they fought separately. You had the US Armed, you had the US Navy, you had the US Army, you had the US Air Force, US Marine Corps. In 1986, the political establishment said enough is enough. You can't be fighting all these different wars of your own. Sit down, reorganize, fight jointly. So you had the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986, which forced the US military to come together. We would have had something like that, ladies and gentlemen, with the Kargil Review Committee, but that key recommendation has not been implemented. The government is content to let the armed forces be the way it is. So why is this happening in an economy that's supposed to be the world's second largest, second fastest growing economy? It's got 39 ordnance factories, it's got a vibrant private sector, it's got defense shipyards, it's got a huge aeronautical complex. And why would this happen in such a large, dynamic, vibrant country where the Prime Minister mentions, you know, it's time to unleash the animal spirits of the economy, and why is this happening? I come back to the point of vision, where there's a saying which says that what use is a map if you don't know where you're going? The larger point here is there's an utter lack of vision within the Ministry of Defense today. You have a defense minister who's unable to articulate a huge vision, a strategic vision of where he'd see the Indian Armed Forces 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line. And you have individual services who are running their own little fiefdoms. They do as they please. So you have these bitter inter-service rivalries. You have the army which wants to create an air force because the air force won't listen to them. You have the air force which wants to raise an army. You have the navy which, poor guys, they're all out at sea all the time. They're, you know, the least Cinderella's children. But the reason, again, this entire drift, which is going to cost us very dearly in the future, is because of this lack of vision, lack of strategic vision that we've not seen in the last 5 or 6 years. It keeps in with what's happening with the government in the last decade or so. The lack of strategic vision is costing us a lot of defense capability. It's not that it doesn't exist. If you look at this gentleman here, he's very happy because he's standing here in front of what is the first indigenous howitzer made in India. He's the CEO of a small company called Tata Power, which manufactures trucks and does a lot of defense electronics. And that is a gun that Tatas have developed by themselves. Very quietly, they've gone and bought technology abroad. They've integrated it with a lot of their own equipment and electronics and fire control solutions, etc. The truck, which you can't see a lot of, is a Tata truck. For the last 6 months, he's been running around in the Ministry of Defense trying to get permission for a firing range so he can try this gun, which is the first Indian gun. I mean, this is like a breakthrough. It's like the first Indian automobile or the first Indian satellite or the first Indian missile. But the Ministry of Defense has looked at its papers and said, we can't find a particular provision where we can allow you to fire your gun. So, you know, you have this entire thing of talking of the private sector participation. This is where the private sector is today. Mr. Tata is waiting in queue because the Ministry of Defense hasn't been able to find a particular provision where he can fire his gun in an Indian firing range. So what is happening, ladies and gentlemen, is that when we buy 70% of our equipment from abroad, what we are doing is we are actually subsidizing the foreign private sector. If you ask the private sector, we are killing our private sector at the cost of the foreign private sector. We are creating jobs in the United States, in Israel, in Russia, in Great Britain. Like Mr. Prabhu said, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We are subsidizing the foreign private sector. And I'll tell you how this works, because a few years back, there was an interview by one of the head of an organization called Sibat. They are the ones who export, they're the Israeli company that exports armaments. And he was asked about the impact of defense exports on Israeli economy. So he said, well, we incidentally are one of the largest buyers of defense hardware from Israel. And he said that every $1 billion in exports helps create 10,000 jobs in the Israeli private sector, 10,000 high technology jobs with every $1 billion of exports in arms. I asked somebody in the private sector here that how many jobs could you create in the Indian private sector if you had $1 billion, if $1 billion were pumped in? He says, it's very simple, just add another zero. So you're talking of at least $10 billion worth of opportunities that are squandered, that are being exported for this lack of vision. We are going to pay a very, very heavy price for this lack of vision. And it explains, for instance, why foreign leaders come here with very large delegations, large business delegations, and they apologize for Jallianwala Bagh, and they second our, membership of the Security Council. Oh yes, we are behind you, because they want your money, and we're very happy to give it to them. And so what is the way forward? What are the examples that we can look at? I mean, coming down to a country that's down to 70%, importing 70% of its hardware. I mean, money is not the only criteria. I mean, money is only part of the story. It's how that money is spent. I mean, how that money translates onto the ground. Is it able to deliver efficiencies on the ground? Is it able to add more firepower, more punch to your military machine that actually makes an impact on the ground? But it clearly doesn't, because if you have the armed forces which are still in the 1960s and the 70s, they haven't been able to replace any of their equipment, then you haven't got bang for the buck. The country that we should actually look at is in the news right now. It's South Korea. In just 40 years, South Korea has gone from being a net importer of security like us. In the early 70s, South Korea was like India. They used to import everything from the United States. They had the benefit of the US nuclear umbrella, of course. And they imported everything from assault rifles to guns to howitzer, everything, warships. And in the 70s, the South Korean government set up a series of progressive policies. They involved the private sector. They involved the Tatas, the Ambanis, the Birlas of South Korea, and they said, look, we need self-sufficiency in defense production. They put out a roadmap. So in the span of less than 4 decades, South Korea goes from being, it goes the whole way. It goes from being an importer of hardware to then it upgrades that hardware, and finally it designs and develops its own hardware. So in 3 decades, by 2007, you have South Korea being a contender for Indian defense contracts. This is a country that started much after India. The path of industrialization was much, much later than ours, nearly 20 years. And today they're here in South Block. They're trying to sell us howitzers and fighter aircraft and what have you. So to conclude, defense budget cuts do affect national security. But that's just one of the problems. I mean, like I said earlier, spending more money on defense is not going to get you anywhere unless you ensure that that gives you more bang for the buck. And what we have today is I mean, obviously the situation is very far from that. And the lack of this strategic planning is costing us grave. I mean, we will probably not know the effects of this until much later, until like what happened in 1962 or in 1998 when you have, or 99, when you have the Indian armed forces that are completely neglected for a decade. It's a cycle that it always keeps repeating itself with unnerving periodicity, that you're called to, one day the armed forces are woken up and they said, look, the nation needs you. The guy says, well, I haven't got this. He says, no, never mind, just go and fight. And as General Malik said in 99, we'll just fight with what we have. So the choice, therefore, is stark. Without a vision for your armed forces, without the strategic vision, which sadly is not coming from South Block, which isn't coming from the Defense Ministry,